Oh, Gwen, that must be so difficult for you. Your 24-hour care nurse quit because she wouldn't make you coffee, and then you haven't seen. You're telling me you haven't even seen your housekeeper since she got picked up by ICE? That you've had to look after your child, your disabled child. Oh, sorry, yeah, I know you don't like that language, but this is what we use here. You've had to look after your disabled child all on your own. You haven't even had time to post photos of them on your Instagram MLM. I'm sorry, family awareness account, family special needs count. I know. That must be. How have you been able to do anything? Oh, oh. Dysentery with Danielle is getting more followers than you, and your account is dropping now. That's. I don't know. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I don't really have time for you right now, but I am gonna let you in for free. I'm gonna let you in. The rope's about to drop and the gates are about to open. I'm gonna let you in right now. Okay, and you can go up to Medical Mama Bear Mountain and you can talk to Brenda. Okay, I'm sure Brenda will know, but Brenda will know how to handle this better than me. Okay, I know it's really, really hard to raise one of these kids. It's really difficult. Yep. Okay, you go on up. Okay, I gotta open the gates and invite the guest in. Okay. All right, you go. Another one. I swear to God, I don't know what to do. It's so hard for them. Try being disabled. The gates of Disabledland are now open. I am your humble host, Wes of Disabledland, and today we have a very special guest, all the way from the mother podcast, Bitching and Bolusing with Courtney and Brittney. We've got half of that. Brittney, come on in.
Hello.
Can you believe these people?
I mean, yes and no. I've been doing it for a while now, so nothing surprises me.
I just don't understand. I don't get it. But if you could tell, and yeah, we're gonna throw up a little triggery warning this episode. I rarely do it unless I'm talking about death or sexual assault, but we're gonna do it for this because Brittney's here and Brittney likes to piss people off, but warn people she's going to piss them off. So Brittney, what are we trigger warning for today?
Yeah, so I don't even think I don't trigger warning necessarily to piss people off. That's kind of just like my MO. But I do try to throw up trigger warnings with things like we've done it before on, the Mother podcast for birth injury and things like that. But this one in particular is really about outcomes from parents that maybe, have abused their disabled children or murdered their disabled children. I mean, this happens in real life as much as people don't want to admit it. And I just find that the discussion around parenting disabled children in general can be triggering for some, disabled listeners. And that's kind of why I'm saying let's throw up a trigger warning just in case.
Yeah, that makes sense. I drop very few. I don't know that I've dropped one yet in the previous 6 episodes.
I don't think you have, no.
Brittney gets to listen to them all first. So okay. So basically, we're mostly talking about the medical parent complaint department today, are we not?
We are. And I think it's that. I think it's like the results from that. I think that this is kind of somewhat how Bitching and Bolusing started, right? It wasn't necessarily complaint wise, but it was definitely about like privacy and autonomy for children, and me kind of like throwing some fuel on the fire and being like, why are you people not giving your children privacy and autonomy? Like, why do you have to post them in diapers or post your kid getting a G-tube change or post your kid like intubated in the hospital or on a life flight, or like the fucking ambulance pictures drive me by. I don't understand the ambulance photos. I really don't. But they exist and they're everywhere. And that was kind of what triggered me to ruffle some feathers. And then from there, I got so much flack and so much heat from it. And then I reached out to Courtney and I was like, hey, let's do this fucking thing. But that's kind of how Bitching and Bolusing started. And it's definitely evolved since then. It's kind of gone. It's touched on so many subjects. But we kind of bounce back and forth a lot frequently about the privacy and autonomy, and then about like the complaining part of parenthood, which is just like, oh God. I don't
Oh,
get
the
it.
the complaints. I don't get it either, because when I see these posts of, it's just so hard, that one that I somebody sent me, some bad cop sent
Wonder
me,
who.
of, oh, it's just, when we had Billy in the home, we used to be able to go out to dinner and it wasn't a
Oh
problem.
God.
It was so uncomplicated, but we just
No,
felt like we had to bring him back.
we can talk about that one, because I think that we've discussed, Courtney and I have discussed this on an episode actually. So that was me. I've sent that to you. And this account is an account of a sister and a brother, and the whole account is just like, oh my God. But she talks in one particular post about how the parents had decided to institutionalize her brother, and how he just wasn't thriving in this, home for adults with disabilities, and or institution, right? Let's just be honest here. And
Prison
she
camp.
was yeah, right, seriously. And she was talking about how he wasn't thriving, and they made the decision after, I think it was 3 years, to bring him home, and all this. And like, it got really fucking weird, because then it was like, oh well, he wasn't thriving, but it was nice because the three of us, as in her and her parents, we got to go out and do things. And I was just sitting there and I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, are we really gonna throw a silver lining until like putting a person into an institution where they're not thriving and they're not getting proper care? Like, we're gonna silver line that? Because I don't see a silver lining. Like, ugh.
Yeah, that one, I have revisited that account a couple
Yeah.
times. I don't know if other people have sent me stuff or something, but I look at that one, and I mean, he's got to be like late teens.
Oh no, no, no. The brother?
Yeah,
No, he's like in his 30s.
he's in his 30s.
Yeah, he's like in his 30s.
Like, because I knew he was like a full grown man at
Yeah.
least, and
Mm-hmm.
that okay, when people, I look at that account, and hard trigger warning here for other disabled people, and I am not talking about the quality of life of disability here. I am genuinely talking about the quality of life of, that is the home you are in, that is the situation you are in, and you literally cannot physically get out. And I don't know what his communication level is, but that situation, having no control, that is what people should be talking about, of, I would rather be dead than in the situation. Not in the situation of being that disabled, but in the situation of being under control of those people, and all over Instagram with, what, they've got at least, what, 10K followers?
Oh God, I think it's more than that. It
They
might be like in the hundreds of thousands.
With that many people watching and
Yeah.
having no fucking control, that, I'm sorry, put a bullet in me, I'm done. That is not, being disabled is a life. That is not a fucking life. I don't know what that group home was like,
Mm.
but there'd be serious consideration to what is the better option for me personally.
So this actually is like an excellent segue for me, because one thing that I really wanted to discuss was the potential negative effect that can come from this almost like victimization of parents and family, right? And I'm not talking about like the obvious negative effects of like reducing quality of life or just constantly being in this negative mindset and like that affecting your child. I know so many parents that do not presume competence with their children simply because they can't get out of this like negative fucking headspace that like their child actually does have competence, and that directly affects the child. So I'm not necessarily talking about that. That's always kind of like, it should be obvious. Those things should be obvious, that living in this headspace of constantly victimizing yourself is going to have a direct effect on your child and your family. I'm talking about the things that don't get talked about, right? So like, okay, so there are these like big accounts, right? They're therapists, they're social workers, they're just like special needs support moms and like all of this, and they try to validate feelings of parents and caregivers. And I understand that that space has to exist. I understand that like validation does need to exist, and not just like for parents of disabled, for all parents. I think like all parents to some extent need to be validated, because it's like a fucking jungle out here, right? Like parents in general just like don't get support. There's no such thing as a village. So I understand that. But these accounts in particular, they're offering validation for the victimization that these parents are feeling for having a disabled child. And like, they need to fucking take ownership of that, because this is such a dangerous narrative to these parents and to these children. And it has such a terrible trickle down effect, because if you cannot get out of that, like, I'm the victim of my child's disability, which just sounds so weird to even say out loud, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
out of that mindset, you're just gonna keep like drowning and drowning and drowning, because a lot of the issues that families do face, and I'm not saying that there's not added challenges to parenting a disabled child. There is. Like, I just fucking went like balls to the wall this past week. Like, I'm sure, Wes, you probably noticed I was completely MIA because I have been like dealing with so much IEP shit
Oh,
that like other parents don't have to deal with. And like, I fucking had to like send in my people essentially to like deal with bullshit that I shouldn't have to deal with it. But all of these things, it's like the bigger systemic issue, right? Like the systemic ableism, all of that. So it's not to say that that doesn't exist, but there's a difference between making yourself a victim of your quote unquote child's disability and recognizing the systemic ableism that creates the barriers for you to get your child the proper quality care of life, just everything, proper education, proper health care, insurance that fucking actually helps your kid and doesn't hurt your kid. Like, all of these things, they're not like a direct correspondence to your child's disability. This is the systemic issue. So I think it's important to validate those things. Like, those things need to be validated in a productive way that can help change the systemic ableism and help parents see that. But when you're fucking sitting there and you're creating content that's like, you're so brave for having a disabled child, like, oh my God.
Well, how many times have I yelled and screamed on Instagram and probably on your podcast, either on bonus episodes through the Patreon or like in just the regular episodes of like, you can't get shit for your child. That's you are not being denied. Your child is being denied. Okay, this is not a parental rights issue. This is not a mommy and daddy rights issue. This is a disability issue. And as soon as you start to frame it as like it is your problem, not your child's problem that you simply have to deal with, then you've lost the plot, you've lost the script, and you need to reevaluate. As far as the pity party, it's one of those things where, and it may be one of the cruelest things I say to parents, but it's like, no one is making you keep them.
Well, okay, so like that's the thing, right? Is that there's that. And I'm a firm believer that if you're going to have a child you need to be prepared for anything, right? And that includes disability. And if you're not prepared to parent a disabled child and to accept that disability and accept what, comes with having to fight to get your kid like the basic necessities, don't fucking have a child. Like, you can't expect to just have a healthy kid. And this is me coming from, like, I was not prepared to have a disabled child. Like, nobody ever said this to me. So
no one thinks it's going to happen to them.
Nobody thinks it's going to happen to them.
Saying prepare yourself for it is like saying a witch's curse. Like, how dare you say that's a possibility? Don't jinx my child. I'm not going to make one of those babies. Like, what,
Exactly.
They don't, it's like my child's never going to get hit by a car or whatever.
It can happen at any moment. Any moment, your child can become disabled. It doesn't have to happen from birth. It can happen when they're toddlers. It can happen when they're older. It can happen when they're fucking adults. Like, at the drop of a hat, your kid can become disabled. But now, like, we're in this situation where parents are becoming the victim of their situation. And there are so many accounts. And now there is a very good and big reason. I don't think it's a good reason, but there's a very big reason why our accounts like ours are not large accounts. And then there are accounts like the special needs mom, superhero, fucking all that shit accounts. They got like thousands and thousands and thousands of followers because it just validates that victim mindset, right? So now, earlier you had discussed like being in that type of household setting versus being dead or being in an institution. Like, let's talk about that for a second, because you have these large accounts that are validating this victimhood, and that's exactly what they're doing, and not helping parents see the larger issues at play. And now you're like contributing to really awful mental health issues with these parents that they probably are already facing. Like, they're already dealing with mental health struggles because there's just no support for parents in general, but particularly parents who do have disabled children. There's no support. And when like these big accounts are offering the support, saying like, oh yeah, you're like so great for being a mom. Like, like you've made so much sacrifice. You're such a martyr. Like, that contributes so much to the mental health crisis that these parents are facing. Now, it's a larger portion than I think people want to admit. But, like in the grand scope of it, I guess a small portion of the community. But there is a fucking portion of this community, of this parenting community, that abuse their children that are disabled and that murder their children who are disabled. And if you don't think this fucking shit exists, and this is why we've posted the trigger warning, fucking step on Reddit. Just step on Reddit and take a look at what these motherfuckers who are anonymous, what they have to say. Because we have seen so many remarks from parents being like, if it were legal to murder my child, I would murder my disabled child. If there was one that was like, oh, when my child was younger, like, I had so many thoughts of just driving my car off of a bridge with them in it. Like, this exists. And when you're validating that victimhood, you're only like feeding this mindset. Now let's go into cases that have actually happened, right? like there's actually people out there who have murdered their disabled children. And if you want to say it's like because of mental health issues, which some of them have been, if you want to say it's because of lack of support, I don't know. I don't fucking know. But like, these cases have existed. And one case that always kind of pops up into my mind is a woman called Lacey Spears. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She ended up murdering her 5-year-old son. Now, granted, she had Munchausen by proxy. So she did have a mental health issue. But if you hear her backstory, you would literally sit there and be like, wait a minute. This sounds like every single special needs mama that I know. Because she lived in these spaces. She lived in these spaces of validating the victimhood. She made a mommy blog for her son and his medical complexities and their journey. She posted constantly, like almost daily, about her child's health issues and the crises that he was going through and the sacrifices she had to make and all this. She ended up fucking murdering her son from literally table salt, sodium, a sodium overdose. And she put sodium into his G tube and she injected him with so much sodium that he ended up having brain swelling and dying at 5 years old. Now she lived in these fucking spaces. Like, are we seeing the kind of connection here of why I get so fucking heated when I'm sitting there and I'm saying, like, this whole victimization of parents and caregivers, like this whole martyr concept, it can be really, really fucking harmful. Not just for like the disabled community as a whole, but for these kids, these fucking kids. Like, do you think that there aren't parents out there that are 1 foot over the edge of either fucking murdering their kids or abusing their kids or sending them to a fucking institution? Like, this happens. I could name so many cases. I mean, go on Google. Just like Google parents that have murdered their disabled children. Like,
Oh yeah, and this is why I don't go into these spaces, because the question I wanted to ask after you told that story was, okay, and then did somebody came to the home and shot the bitch, right?
no,
Somebody
I
shot
mean,
her.
like, you, right?
Like
And
like we're bringing back stake burnings, public executions, because make a fucking example out of the bitch. Trigger warning, make a fucking example out of her. Get medieval.
I mean, that, so like,
I
this is,
have no sympathy.
I know, and I don't either, but this is the problem, is you want it, like, we sit here and we talk about all of these issues and it, everyone says it, like, it just doesn't get press. Like, have you heard of that before I talked about it? Like,
Not that specific story. I do tend to avoid those stories to begin with. I know that shit is out there. I know that shit happens.
but
Once again, it's my reaction to it that then all of a sudden I'm the bad
like,
guy.
oh yeah, I know, right?
I'm saying, and did anybody spread her brains over the sidewalk after that? No, she probably got away with it, or a light sentence. Because, oh, look at this thing she had to look after. How pity her, and all the mama bears supporting, and that. And I'm just like, no, bring back the burnings.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the issue, right? Is that it doesn't get press. You don't hear about it. I will go out on a limb and say it's most likely because this was a disabled individual, her child. And you look at the other one. What's the other one whose kids weren't, like, she had a whole slew of kids. They weren't disabled, like something caravan, whatever. She was like a mom vlogger, right? And like she had like a gajillion followers and all of this. And then it came out that she was abusing her kids, all of her non-disabled kids. Oh my god, the fucking press that got released because
Oh, yeah.
it was everywhere. You could not like go online without seeing something about this fucking bitch who abused her kids and like profited off of their existence and like
Oh,
had
yeah.
all these mom vlogs, right? But then this one who literally had a mom vlog about her child's disability and illness, who then fucking murdered her kids. Crickets.
Oh, but it's so much more understandable, Courtney. I mean, oh no, Brittany, I am so sorry.
I was like, wrong, bitching and bolusing.
Yep. Yeah, you know what? The weird thing is, I have so often I'm like bitching and bolusing with Brittany and Courtney,
It's I
and
know.
I'm constantly switching back. I don't know if it's an alphabetical thing or what. No, this is Brittany, not Courtney. But like I mean, they're not really people, right? Like it's not the same. You know, it's completely understandable. It's like having too many kittens. But like I love the comparison to, you know, the able-bodied family Instagrammers, TikTokers, YouTubers, because it's like I posted a couple weeks ago this great TikTok. I reposted it on Instagram of this woman that was like taking a shot at like the YouTuber families of like, oh, you know, we saw this vaguely brown baby that
I
we
think you
just
sent that to me.
we just snatched. We think he's probably Dominican. We don't know. Our numbers were down, so we just grabbed a kid. And the daughter's like, the book of my life as a child vlogger is already being written, and I'm looking at publishers now. Like, you're gonna have a lot of kids going around and suing their parents later,
it's already happening.
but they're the ones that can.
And that's the problem, right? Like, that's the big issue. And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's already, I'm already seeing it happen. I mean, there was a woman on, no, she wasn't, I mean, she was like 16 or 17, and she went into Reddit and she was just like, I need help because my mom's a vlogger and like lives on TikTok, and she's posting me all the time, and I've asked her not to, and she's just like not respecting me. And this is somebody who like can vocalize their concerns and say like, hey, please don't do this. And now you have these kids that cannot verbalize that. And then you have, you know, the other side of the parents that don't even think that their kids understand it, right?
Yep.
And it's just like, when you live in that fucking headspace, you know, I think to some extent we all kind of create some portion of our own reality, right? Like, we are all responsible for some level of what our reality is. And a lot of that is your mindset on things. And I look at it with Cyrus, and I think if I lived in this space, those spaces that I'm talking about, and I think if I like listened to all of the medical professionals early on, and I think if I just like bought into this narrative of like, I'm a hero for being a mother to my disabled child, he would fucking not be where he is right now in terms of like cognition and his quality of life and his independence. Like, there's no
Oh, hell
way.
no.
No,
Because
right?
because
Exactly.
if you treat them like they can't do anything, if you treat them
Then
like they're
they're
a
not
burden,
going
if
to do
then
anything.
you're not going to do the things.
Yeah,
I mean, there are a lot of parents of able-bodied kids that, for whatever reason, hate being parents. Those kids don't do well either.
I know.
So then you amplify it with the disability, and it's just like, yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
not
I mean, and
gonna work.
it even goes back to like all of this stuff that I've been dealing with school. And I have always fought, like from the very beginning, I've always fought of like the presumed competence, right? Like, Cyrus understands, and he does understand everything. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah,
he is fully like
yeah.
cognitive of his surroundings and what's being said about him or just in general. Like, fully competent in all of that. And I have always pushed for that so hard with people who are not in our bubble, essentially, because
Yeah.
anyone would look at him and be like, no, he doesn't, because, you know, he uses a wheelchair, he's non-speaking, like he uses a communication device, and he uses it very well, but it's still something he's working on. But before all of that, like, it was really hard to almost convince people that he was competent and like had
Oh yeah.
cognition. It was the weirdest thing. And we're still dealing with that at 5 years old with this 5-year-old kid who's very bright, and we're still dealing with that, and we're dealing with it in school. And I just sit back and I'm like, if I just lived in that space, the people who are currently trying to take advantage of him because of his disability would be able to take advantage of him because of his disability.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's terrifying to me. That's terrifying to me, to think that like parents live in that fucking headspace, and outside of the home their kids are being taken advantage of, just like my kid would be if I lived in that fucking headspace. And I probably wouldn't even see it. That's the thing. I don't
Well,
even think
no,
I'd be aware of how he's being taken advantage of.
because if you lived in that headspace, you would be taking advantage of him too.
Yes. Yeah.
It wouldn't, there would be no bitching and bolusing. There would be the super Psy Instagram extravaganza.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, it's so gross, and it's so messy, and it's so dirty. And it's like, when I sit there and I see kids that are flourishing more outside of the home, That's scary to me. Like, that's fucking scary to me. And it's like, I'm seeing it on social media, and it's happening, and it's like, oh, oh,
Oh no.
oh, what does that
Like,
home life look like? Like,
well, yeah, exactly. And then, other things get pulled into it that I'm going to cover in other podcasts and not drag you into. But yeah, like I don't, and we have to acknowledge that the algorithm is the problem.
I
The
think it's part of the problem.
The algorithm, I mean, but it's a big part of the problem because it's the algorithm that pushes this shit. Because this is the shit that is seen as somehow positive and uplifting. It starts with the inspiration porn, and it starts with that, and then it gets into this darker shit. And I mean, I can understand exactly what you're saying about if you were in these spaces, because I look in horror, not even as a disabled person, absolute horror at like social media and Twitter and TikTok. And I absolutely know that if I was born, let's say 30 years later, or if I was a teenager now, or like in like 13, 14 now, with the way things are, I would be such a fucking incel. You have no idea. Just for the shit I went through when I was younger and people playing fucking pranks on me and shit. And that I would be such a fucking Andrew Tate worshipping, Elon Musk wanting to blow piece of shit. You have no idea. I would be in. You think I'm insufferable now? At least I'm insufferable in a good way. I would have been the worst fucking little incel internet troll the world had ever seen. Have you been robbed? Just because your disabled child needs a toy to be adapted so that they can play with it? Adapted Design refuses to rob the disabled or their families just to adapt a toy. None of this $80 to modify a $10 toy price gouging criminal behavior. And now they even have a book that will teach you how to do the modifications yourself. Before you get robbed, check out Adapted Design at adapted-design.com, because adaptive play shouldn't be how an able takes a score. Just because I would have got sucked into those spaces, because there was a place in my life where I could have, but the internet wasn't around then.
It's a scary place.
And now you've got like these parent groups and that, and like they all clom together, and then the algorithm amplifies them. It is much easier still to find posts from that other podcast that I will call out here, and not on the mother podcast and not by name, but those giant blue eyes that look dead into space and tell you how hard it is and how wonderful you are for looking after this sponge that you spawned. If you know who you are, I don't respect you, I don't follow you, and fuck you, and thank you for listening to this podcast.
No, they won't be listening to this podcast.
Oh, I know they won't. I just like to throw that in there.
No, I know, but that's like the issue, right? Is that these spaces exist, these people exist, I don't even know. Can we make up a term for them, like validation warriors? I don't even know. They exist. And the problem is that when they get fucking called out, which we on Bitching and Bolusing have called them out, it's like really, it just turns into like your mom shaming and you're this and that. And it's like, but there's this huge picture, right? And when you have hundreds of thousands of followers sitting there and being like, oh my god, I sacrificed so much for my kid. Like, there's gonna be 1 or 2 or 10 that are fucking unhinged. And like, this is not going to end well for their child. Like, and even if, okay, let's remove the parents from this narrative, right? For a second. Let's just like say all the parents are great and just like me, because I'm great. let's just say, like, let's remove the parents, right? But let's say this narrative still exists, right? Of like parents with disabled children make so much sacrifice, they're such martyrs, this and that. Okay, parents aside, well, how does that look on society? Right? And Courtney and I have touched on this in one of our episodes about like mental health and all that. Now, what is society's perception of these parents and how is that affecting it? And I will tell you right fucking now, these accounts, these spaces are telling society what they already think, which is that having a disabled child is a burden. It is a worst case fucking scenario that nobody that doesn't have a disabled child wants. Like, that is feeding this fucking narrative. Now, let's look at the bigger picture of that and how society's view on this actually does affect the parents, right? So, like, another situation that just happened, again, like Courtney and I touched on this on another episode, was Cindy Alley up in Canada, not far from you.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That one I am aware of.
Yes. Okay. Right. So, like, there are a couple outcomes from this situation, right? 2011, potential home break-in. No proof or evidence of that actually happening. Supposedly, her 16-year-old daughter with cerebral palsy and epilepsy died during the break-in. Somebody smothered her. Blah 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 blah. She ended up getting arrested. The mom. She ended up, by jury, she was found guilty of murdering her child. The jury was like, this is a mercy killing. Her child was suffering. It was a mercy killing. She mercy killed her daughter. Okay? That is the most fucking ableist verdict that you can fucking come up with. Now, she went back. What, it's 2023, did she? I think, right? It just happened in December.
Mhm.
And she asked for an appeal, and she got a solo judge trial. And the judge said, there's too much reasonable doubt here. I don't know that you did it. I don't know that you didn't do it. There's not enough evidence either way. And now here's the situation. You have society sitting there saying, having a disabled child such a burden. All of these accounts that have disabled children are saying it's such a burden. You potentially have an entire jury. Now, let's say she was innocent. Let's say Cindy was innocent. You have an entire fucking jury that believes that and found her guilty if she were innocent. Found her guilty because they cannot possibly fathom the idea of having a disabled child and living a happy life.
Yep.
That's wild to me, right? Or you have like the other side of things where if Cindy did do it, her mental health was so fucking awful and like she probably lived in that space of like, poor me. She probably didn't have any help or support because it just doesn't exist. And she could have fucking killed her kid and now she's walking free. So, like, you have these two sides of the story, which are terrifying. And
Yep.
how are these spaces contributing to that and contributing to society and contributing to, like, the outcomes of children and parents? Like, oh my God, I feel like I, like, am constantly bashing my fucking head against a wall with these things. Like, I feel like I'm talking into just like dead air sometimes because I will say these things and people are just like, you're just a mom shamer. Oh my God. We should all support each other even when we fucking kill our kids. Like, I don't.
It's like, yep. I'll support you. I'll support you all the way to the gallows. And right when the little door at the bottom falls out, that's when I'll stop supporting you.
It's just like, I really have to wonder. And it's, again, it's like not to invalidate the challenges that do exist that are more like systemic issues,
all.
right? It's not to invalidate that. But I do wonder, like, if the tides changed and we weren't just, like, victimizing these parents, like, I really would love to see a world where that exists.
Do you know, because you look into these cases more than me. Have any of these parents done interviews afterwards? Has anyone had the gall, like I would, to say to them, is your bitch ass happier now?
I don't think so. I mean, like, I know that there have been interviews, like Cindy, I think, actually had interviews. Lacey I believe that there's actually a documentary on her. I'm not positive on that, but I mean, at the very least, there's like news stuff out there. But no, I mean that I don't think so. Like directly to their faces, I don't believe so. I mean, there's even like the curious case of Natalie Grace, right? Like, I don't know if you've watched that, but like that whole wild fucking situation, and like I can't even go into it because it would just like take up this entire episode. But like even when they were interviewing the parents or the dad particularly, I don't think the mom got interviewed at all in season 1, but like it was never like what the fuck was wrong with you people? Like
Well, no.
I know.
Why would you even ask? It's a completely normal thing to do.
But even if it's just it's so problematic, Wes. Like it's so I don't know. That's why I wanted to throw up the trigger warning to all of this, because it's just like this fucking mindset, whether people want to admit it or not, like it's killing kids.
Because like and I ask, the wanting to, and by the way, I am gonna throw out the longest shot in the world here. If you're listening to this and you have been acquitted of murdering your disabled child for whatever reason, I would like to talk to you. I would like to have you on. I will scrape together a couple $100 Canadian just to have you on, because you probably need the money after all the legal fees to get you off of murdering your disabled child.
It's a long shot,
But
Wes. That was
I want to have you on, and I want to talk to you. Threats won't even be made. I just want to know. I don't even want to know what was going through your mind then. I want to know what's going through your mind now. Are you happy now? Are you happier? Is your life better? Has your quality of life increased? Don't you wish you had just taken that child and, I don't know, dropped them at a bus stop and let the authorities deal with them, and at least given them the smallest fucking chance in the world to survive without your pathetic, worthless ass?
well, so
Come talk to me.
wild situation that happened just yesterday or the day before is actually a follower on Bitching and Bolusing had reached out to us. I hadn't seen the content, but they were like, did you see the reel that's been going around about the mom who was saying that she regretted keeping her son on life support as a baby, and now he's like a kid, like an older kid, and like disabled but thriving and happy? I'm like the mom is saying that now. Like, this is fucking crazy to me. This is bonkers. What are we fucking doing here? What are we doing here? What's going on?
We're not smacking enough people is
Oh
what
my
we're doing,
God,
Brittney.
I don't know, but then that's the shit. Like, this is the shit that I'm talking about. Like, this content is existing and it's being put out in the world, and like, you are so fucking shunned if you say anything negative. And so nobody says anything negative, right? Like how many times have we gone into places and like been fucking crucified for it?
Oh yeah, I know. And I don't even know. I mean, I know most of the time it's like talking to a wall, which is why I'm so brutal, is because I'll take a sledgehammer to the wall. Because I don't fucking care.
And the thing is that I'm talking about all of this, and to some extent, like, and here's where I always try to be like somewhat reasonable, right? Because I think that these spaces are really dangerous. I think that they can exist in a very healthy way. I think that there's an important factor to having these spaces exist, but that they need to exist in a very healthy way. But here's where I kind of want to like somewhat play devil's advocate a little bit, is that what I'm seeing a lot of times, just from maybe a little bit more of my inner circle, is that there are a lot of other factors that play in like the mindset surrounding disability, right? We can't just talk about like the parenting community as a whole without acknowledging the nuances, right? So there's like the socioeconomic side of things, there's there's the cultural side of things, right? And so like I personally see a lot of moms who are trying really, really hard to, I call it healing, right? Which is like, like developing that level of acceptance and this and that. Like, so I see a lot of moms that are trying really, really hard to reach the level that like Courtney and I am at, right?
Mhm.
And then there's these roadblocks that are almost being put up for them by maybe like the culture that their family's from. Like, I know one mom in particular who's trying really hard to just like come to that level of like acceptance and acknowledgement and all of this. And like the culture that her family's from, like, it's very like pray the disability away, right? So she's like, my kid is great, like my kid is perfect, and they're like, no, like we need to pray the disability away, and like that really manifests into this like super negative. It plants those seeds into the brains of these moms, and I'm gonna say moms, that are trying to reach that level of acceptance. I see it with a lot of moms who, I don't know why they're breeding with these men, but the dads are just not accepted. I'm seeing like a lot of fathers who have disabled sons. And then there's like this whole like, my son will never play football, my son will never be like a baseball player, and this and that. And they're almost like disassociating from their kids. And that's putting, yeah, but like it
We can
sounds,
officially talk for another hour now.
I know, but like here's the thing, like these fathers are now disassociating from their kids. It's putting more pressure onto the mom, right? Like she is now the primary
Yeah.
parent to an even higher extent. And like when you're now dealing within the household of like not having support from the people that are literally living with you and who have reproduced with you, like you
Yeah.
are going to start feeling like all of this is a burden. And because you're just not getting any support. And it's like, I don't understand why these women are fucking reproducing with these men. Like right there should show you sexuality is not a choice. Like, ugh. But
Yeah.
like there are so many nuances that do contribute to that, and I think that that has to be acknowledged, because I really genuinely think that there are moms out there that do want to get to a place that like Courtney and I am at, and it's just like they're just,
But the
it's
groups are
yeah,
the,
it's almost like
the
they're like being
it's
tethered
not just
back.
that, but we've both said it before. These groups are predatory
Mm-hmm.
because once again, like Gwen, they're also running the MLMs. They're
Yeah.
they're making the money off of it. They're selling the products. They're doing the things. They're selling the books. They're selling the courses. They're hawking the treatments, all this shit. So it goes out there. I want to ask you, because you are literally in these spaces and
Mm-hmm.
I am not, for obvious reasons, although I might be, and you never know for sure. I could have a fake
He
profile.
might be lurking in the background.
But when almost every one of the hardcores that has come at me, shut me down, blocked me, screamed at me, whatever, from what I'm seeing, I am seeing a very large sea of white.
Yeah, okay, so like that's the thing, right? Is that like I know I talked about the nuances, like the socioeconomic side of it, the cultural side of it, even like the religious side of it and stuff like that, but like I am seeing a huge issue with like cis white women.
Because like
Like,
almost all of the women of color that I am seeing that have are parenting disabled kids, they tend to be the good ones.
well, I think that like that can almost maybe come from already being in a minority.
Yeah.
Right? So like they've already to some extent have experienced like the challenges that come from being in a minority. Right? Now like you look at like cis white women and it's all about community and like this and that, like you're the majority, right? And
Right.
that's really what I am seeing, like a large portion of these like cis white women who are just like they live in these spaces. And let me tell you one thing is that it is so much easier, just speaking from my own like situation, you can have a community in these spaces. Like, you can build friendships in these spaces.
Yeah.
Like, you can have the support within these. It is so fucking easy to do because everyone's just in this fucking echo chamber patting each other on the back and like giving each other blowjobs and all that. Like, it's so fucking easy to get that community within that space. As somebody who has stepped outside of that space, oh, it is so fucking hard to find that community. Courtney and I both have like essentially been blacklisted from the parenting. Like, we are finding our people, which is really great because like the people we are finding now they align with our views. But like, to not be in that space and to like have to find community and support outside of that space is really fucking tough. And I think that that's why a lot of these people live in that space, because they're like, I have so many people that support us and love us and care for us and pray for us and blah 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 blah. And then if they're not there, they don't get that sense of community. So like, I think a lot of it is that.
Yes, but you and Courtney also have different community now, because
Yeah.
you also have more so, or at least are gaining support from the disability community, which is actually going to help you raise your kids
Yes.
better than a,
Medical mama.
human centipede of like box eaters that are just glomming together eating their own shit. So yeah, I see you. I've got a whole mountain of them up there. But like, where was I going with this? Like, you are building a different community that is, yeah, there's the podcast and yes, there's the t-shirts and stuff, but it's not this predatory thing that is just looking for these moms that are just, I like, the two of you have talked about it on the Mother podcast of like, oh, well, this is, you get pulled into these groups because you're just looking for help, and all of a sudden you're like deep into this toxic mess.
I think for me, and I'm just going to be completely transparent, and I think Courtney would say the same exact thing. Once we started really listening to the voices of disabled individuals, it forced us to self-reflect in like tremendously challenging ways. Like, and Wes, like, you will go into spaces and you will speak reason and you instantly get shot down. And you get shot down because it is so much easier to just kind of like la 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 than to self-reflect. Like, self-reflection and trying to better yourself is so challenging. Like, that is a lot of work. And I've gone to a lot of therapy for it too.
I've had to do it myself. I fully admit this podcast would not have existed a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even have considered it.
I think that parents I think that a lot of this is the narrative that's kind of like spoon-fed to them, but I think that they already feel so overwhelmed and so challenged with like their life that to add the layer of self-reflection by saying like, hey, listen to disabled voices, it's kind of like the one thing of like, oh great, well now I have something else I have to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, but if you did that, and again, transparency here, speaking from experience, when I started making that shift within myself, oh my God, did life get so much easier for me. Like, holy hell. Like,
exactly.
It got easier for me. It got better for Cyrus. Like, our whole family just kind of like fluctuated and like it was such a better space at home, and everyone was just happier. And like, I think that if you really kind of take that shift and self-reflect and get out of these like mama bear groups and more into like spaces for disabled individuals and listening to them and following accounts, like, oh my God, your life is going to be so much better and your kids' life is going to be so much better. Like, but I don't know what the resistance is other than it's just like,
The
Like
resistance is
narcissism? I don't know.
the
Like I have no
resistance is
idea.
how dare you tell me I might be doing something
Yeah,
wrong?
it's like so narcissistic, right? Like it's like God, you can't tell.
And that's why I asked about the whole me just seeing a sea of cis white women,
Yeah,
because yeah.
yeah. No, I mean you're very much not wrong there. You're not wrong at all there. I would love to get like an input from somebody else on this too and what they see, but it's a very accurate statement.
I'll be asking when I get the opportunity.
Yeah, and I find like the big accounts, right? Like the mama influencer, medical mama accounts and stuff, like same thing, like cis white
Oh yeah,
women. Yeah.
I saw one. It was well, we could call her Gwen because it works. That was like because it was based on that a couple months ago, and it was I can't remember if she was an autism mom. I can't remember. No, it must have been a physical disability, and it was like talking about how hard it is. Brand new, expensive, fucking accessible vehicle. You know the as we joke when we made the t-shirt, the full-on medical MILF, the tight-ass leggings. This woman had not missed a day of hot yoga in her life and also used her account to sell real estate.
I think that there's like that's a whole other episode of just these accounts not even acknowledging their privilege.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
that's a whole fucking like and then the ones that aren't transparent about it, right? The ones that are like,
Oh, yeah.
we have full-time staff, like we have full-time day nurse, night nurse. Like
I haven't touched my child in 2 weeks.
yeah, or just like yeah, like time to do shit for themselves. Like I do this podcast on weekends when my husband's home, like but then it's like you have these moms that aren't showing that they don't even drive in the car with their kids without somebody being there. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole other thing because that in of itself like fucking skews the hell out of the whole parenting view. It's just that's a whole other fucking episode.
Yeah, I don't even know. There are so many episodes that could spin off from this. The fathers and sons thing I could go on about for about 3 days
Oh
probably.
God,
And
it's a big thing. Like if you really start like paying super super close attention to those spaces, you will see. Like I know families that the fathers are just like really resentful, like very resentful, and a lot of that these parents are so close to just putting their kid in an institution because of the resentment that these fathers have. It's wild. And it
yeah,
just sucks because it hinders a lot of progression that could happen within the family. And moms are there too. Like, this is not like, yeah. Yeah.
oh no, absolutely. Because like, leave your fucking husband and get a nice little divorce settlement, and like take care of your fucking kid.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously. I mean, or just stop reproducing with these men. Like, I don't know. Like, I see it, and then they're like out there popping out more kids, and I'm like, the fuck are you doing?
Well,
Like, you hate your husband. Like, what's going on here?
if you think women go through life thinking they'll never have a disabled child, I got something to tell you about men.
I know. It's been like for fucking eons of all that, right? Like yeah. Fucking.
Yeah. Oh, but we should probably wrap things, and you'll definitely be back, and Courtney will be here eventually.
Yes.
And do you want to drop the wonderful socials for Bitching and Bolusing?
Oh yeah, I mean you can.
Where do they find you?
Yeah, I mean mostly Instagram. We're mostly active on Instagram at Bitching and Bolusing. Go on the website if you already listened to Wes. You already know the website since he's on there. But www.bitchingandbolusing.com. You can catch the mother podcast Bitching and Bolusing anywhere that you get your podcasts. Podbeam, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, all of them. Just type us in somewhere in Google and you'll find us.
I need to talk to you about that.
Oh,
That just reminded me.
that's like Courtney's department. But yeah, so if you listen to Wes, listen to us, and we're similar in our thinking, but we're different with our approach. So, you know, yeah. Wes,
Brittney and Courtney are much less offensive than I am.
I don't know. I mean, like, yes, but in a different way, because we get so much fucking hate. I don't know. In a different way. I think it's because, like, Courtney kind of balances us out. Like, I think that I just, like, go balls to the wall. And she's just like, okay, but I'm going to play a good cop for a minute. And so, like, it's a good balance.
Exactly. And Brittney, did you drop the Patreon?
No. So we are on Patreon. You can find us on Patreon, Bitching and Bolusing podcast, and you can get ad-free listening there. You can get one extra episode, video episode too, so you get to see our pretty little faces per month, and we do early release, so up to a week before the episodes will be released to the public. So be sure to be a Patreon subscriber for some goodies over there.
And on their website, you can also get some wonderful, wonderful merch.
Yes, we love the merch. Come buy our merch. And then it all helps to, like, support the production and all that. Like, you know, we're over here just taking the money and putting it back into production, because it's, like, surprisingly costs quite a bit of money to run a podcast. So, you know.
Yep. All right, so I guess that's it. I will let you go. And yeah, have a good day, Brittney.
Thanks
for coming out.
Thanks so much.
Yep. All right. Bye.
Bye.